What we're going to talk about today is how you can work out 20 minutes, 6 days a week. Take your total volume and see if you could divide it up over short workouts, 6 days a week, 20 minutes, 6 days a week, which is about 2 hours a week. But here's the difference. What you'll get with 20 minutes a day is going to be better results, probably at least 50% faster than 2 1-hour workouts, for example, and definitely more than 1 2-hour workout. Watch what happens to your body, okay? Watch what happens to your body. Literally, it's the same of everything except it's more frequent. And most people will see better results doing it this way. Believe it or not, the workout that can build the most muscle might actually only be 20 minutes.
Ooh, starting to sound like Dave Asprey now.
A wealth of information that he makes up.
Perfect.
No, you can. So I wanted to do this because we were talking about this because that study that came out recently, which kind of confirms what we talk about all the time, which is that when you control for volume, frequency, it makes a big difference. In other words, same total sets, but more often. If you can work out more often, you tend to see better gains. And all of us experience this with ourselves and with our clients. But before this study that came out, there were other studies that showed, oh no, 2 days a week is the same as 4, so long as the volume is equated 4. And all of us are like, oh, I get that, but our experience shows otherwise.
Yeah, I've seen the opposite.
Yeah, that more frequent but shorter workouts, because obviously you have to control for total volume. By the way, for if you're not following, total volume would be like the total sets and exercises you did for the week, right? So you could take all those exercises and sets, do them in 2 workouts or do them in 6 workouts or whatever, and it's not equal. Even though it's all the same, the more frequent you work out, typically the better the results tend to be. And I've experimented with this. I know you guys have too.
Now, this study that you're referencing, well, there's 2 studies. One, the one that you're originally referencing is just recent. So forever on the show, we've been talking about frequency is king.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people besides us that promote, frequency and the importance of it, and that there's studies in the past that it came out and have shown exactly what you're saying, which is if all things are equal, sets, volume, everything at reps, all that stuff like that, either, dividing it over 2 times in a week versus 3 or more ends up winning. And then recently, just a couple of weeks ago, a study came out that debunked that. And then 2 weeks later, this study comes out that you share with us. So what's true? What was missing in the previous study that said that basically debunked what we had been saying? Well, this one now confirms it again.
Right. Well, the problem is it's hard to equate because, or to control for volume and stuff, because lots of compound lifts use lots of muscles. So if you're like, oh, I only hit back twice a week and biceps twice a week, no, you're really hitting biceps 4 days a week, right? Because back exercises tend to use quite a bit of biceps, lots of rowing, lots of pull-ups and stuff like that. So this last study that came out was a single joint exercise, no crossover stimulation. It was just curls. And they compared the same total volume of 2 days versus 5 days. And the 5 days crushed the 2 days, even though the volume was all the same.
So this is without even compound lifts. It was an isolation
exercise. This is just like, let's get everything down to the easiest, most controllable factors. Right. That way we could really compare apples to apples. Otherwise, it gets a bit challenging when you're comparing study to study, because some studies may train at a higher intensity. They may use more compound lifts. So you want to, with studies, you always want if you're going to compare 2 studies, you want the controls to be excellent, to take every possible variable
out. There's no carryover. Like I could see how that could have been, somewhat misleading, because compound lifts, you're going to have that kind of crossover and carryover into other the same muscle groups.
Yeah. And now, and again, and we've all experienced this. In my experience, you're better off working out more frequently and more often. Again, so long as the volume is controlled for, the results. In my experience with clients and with myself, are always better with more frequent, but again, same total volume.
I feel like that's such an obvious thing, because we know this in sports. We already, if you were to ask somebody, hey, you got 3 hours to shoot free throws, spreading it out over 6 days and 30, 45-minute increments is one option, or cramming all 3 hours in one day. What do you think is going to give you the best benefit?
100%. And people forget that the adaptation process, muscular adaptation, it's really a learning process of the body. your skin tanning is an adaptation process. You learning a new skill is an adaptation process. Remember, neural connections have to be made. So what's happening is your brain is literally like your muscles building.
It's learning a pathway.
It's learning something.
The only detriment is if you misuse intensity, and therefore, you teeter more towards overtraining because of you're doing it so frequently. But that's a variable you have to really consider if you are going this.
Well, that's the only reason why I think it's been that, because with sports like shooting a free throw, I'm not going to shoot a free throw with such high intensity that it hinders tomorrow shooting the free throw or the next day shooting a free throw. Weight training presents that challenge because it's so hard for us to measure intensity, especially when so much information is out there about beast mode, all out, training to failure, and all the benefits of training intensely. That's what makes it so challenging. That's why I think a lot of people don't realize how important or how beneficial it will be to be more frequent.
We've been so conditioned that way. So I think a lot of people will misuse it and not realize it because it's just the way that they approach workouts.
Yeah, I'm still guilty of this. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but it doesn't matter. Like if I tell myself, okay, this week I'm gonna try and squat 3 times this week, which I know can be taxing on the body. It's hard for me to do a squat session and not kind of get after it, even in a slice weight. It does not take much to overreach when you're basically hitting that exercise, especially a compound lift like that, every other day. So it takes a lot of and I know the studies, I know the benefits of the frequency. So I think that the average person still has so much of that messaging about getting after it and what a good workout constitutes. Oh, I have to be sweaty.
Yeah.
I have to feel the burn.
I have a soreness.
I have this massive pump. I have to feel soreness. Like these are all the things that they think. So that's going through their head as they're training. But you have to understand that if you're going to increase their frequency like that, you had to dramatically reduce the intensity.
Well, there's 2 things that get in the way. One is that people don't equate volume. So they say, oh, I'm working out my legs once a week. They say do it 3 days a week. They don't reduce the volume of that one workout. They just triple it. Well, okay. Well, now, you're working out 3 times as much, but you're also working out with 3 times as much volume.
You're supposed to spread it out.
Yes. 2 is what you guys are saying. Intensity is an important, it's an important factor in your workout programming. But if you push the intensity too hard, too often, your body only worries about healing. And part of the challenge is that we think that recovery and adaptation are the same thing. They're not. Although they often overlap. One is healing. The other is overcompensating, okay? So it's like if I take sandpaper and I rub my hand and I break the skin down, before my skin builds a callus, it has to heal what has been lost. Then after that happens, I start to build a callus. But if I just keep rubbing the skin down every time it heals, well, now I'm healing and breaking down, healing and breaking down. And people confuse the recovery process with adaptation. They're actually different. One is healing. One is the body saying, how can we become more resilient
for next time?
For next time, right? And they overlap. And this is why people often confuse this. But if you look at studies on like muscle protein synthesis, muscles growing, you'll see positive muscle protein synthesis. Muscle shrinking, you'll see negative protein synthesis. When you work out, that protein synthesis, as measured, spikes at about 24 to 48 hours, and then it starts to drop really quickly. So after about 2 days, you start to lose that muscle building adaptation process, but you might still be sore. You might still be trying to heal. So what happens is people end up just doing the healing process and not really focusing on adaptation. Now, I remember the first time I encountered this, and it blew my mind. I had a trainer that worked for me he was so strong, in particular on the bench press. I could see this guy bench press 4 plates, and I was like, this guy is a maniac. And this is when I remember it was one of the first clubs I ever managed. And I walk in there, and I don't know, it was like day 2, and I see this guy benching, and he's just repping 3 plates, and I'm like, wow, this is crazy. And then I noticed that in between clients, throughout the day, like he'd train a client would leave, he'd have a half hour between clients or whatever, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. He'd go load up the bar, he'd do like 2-3 sets of bench press, and then he'd rack it up and he was done. Yeah. And I thought he was just a workout addict at first. I'm like, oh, this guy's bored, he's just working out. And then I asked him, and he goes, no, that's what I do for bench. He's like, I don't have a workout where I bench. He goes, I literally go out to the floor, I'll throw the weight up a few times, I'll put it up, and I'm done. And the intensity that he used was moderate. It wasn't super high intensity.
He's not maxing out.
He wasn't, it was heavy, but it wasn't super hard. And he got really strong doing that. And I remember I tried that myself with a couple lifts, and my strength literally exploded. That was the first time I had ever been exposed to that.
He's teaching his body to get better at that specific movement. And I've seen this too with one of my clients who made serious progress with pull-ups, and would set up a bar at their house. They would do 1 pull-up a day, then 2 pull-ups a day.
Yeah.
And then just whatever they could do like pretty easily, and then stop it right there. And they would just like continuously do this to a point where they got 20 pull-ups easy. And it was just a continuous thing that they would go and not tell fatigue or anything. It was just whatever they could do, whatever their body felt like strong-wise, they could pull off.
You know, this is the way that a lot of strongmen and strength athletes used to lift way back in the day. So there's like some of the first workout manuals, okay, that were written, you know, like in the late 1800s, okay, early 1900s. If you read them, the commonality amongst them is to not overtax your body and to practice. They would use words like practice your lifts frequently and often. Practice them often, but don't tax your body too much. This is how they talk. Now, later on, it became completely different. I think anabolic steroids played a role in that. I also think that just the total amount of volume that certain advanced, you know, bodybuilders are trained, maybe doesn't make sense to do these kind of workouts.
I also think studies are responsible for that too, because we started studying things in isolation versus like they had to think back then like holistically. They didn't have all these great tools to measure just the damage that's being done or measure how much intensity that's happening.
What worked.
Yeah, what worked. It's like, oh, what we notice is when someone backs off, it's because they had to think holistically versus the ability to study really focused on one thing. I think sometimes we've confused a lot of people by being very specific when we get to understand that the body doesn't operate that way.
No, and some of the best trained athletes in strength sports in the world are Olympic athletes, okay? Because this is a sport where there's been a lot of, if you look at all the strength sports, more money and science has been poured into Olympic lifting than any other strength sport, mainly because it's been an Olympic sport for a long time, and because during the Cold War, it was like bragging rights. The Soviet Union versus America, who could win more medals? Right. And the Soviet Union, this was state-sponsored sports, meaning that their athletes the government was like, we want the best athletes. And they spent a lot of money on studying the best science, the best supplements, the best drugs. I mean, we learned a lot from them when the Soviet Union collapsed and some of their coaches came over. And a lot of the ways they trained was kind of this moderate intensity, very frequent practice of lifts. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, one application of this would be like, let's say you could squat 225 and 10 reps is your max. Okay, that's like your 10 reps, you go to failure. You would practice and do 5 reps every day. And you would do it every day for 30 days, even if 5 reps got so easy. Then after 30 days, you'd add 15 pounds and then do it again. Something like that, right? And the strength gains were insane.
Very long, drawn-out progression.
And what happens, what always follows strength gains, I want people to know this, not always, at some point, you know, I'm talking about when you're super advanced and it gets a little whatever. But especially when you haven't been working out for 5 years consistently, what follows strength gains is muscle. One of the best things, if you see your strength gains go up, 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 you know muscle is following along or building along that, and you get great results. So, you know, what we're going to talk about today is how you can work out 20 minutes, 6 days a week. 20 minutes, 6 days a week, which is about 2 hours a week. 2 total hours. But here's the difference. What you'll get with 20 minutes a day is going to be better results, probably at least 50% faster than 2 1-hour workouts, for example, and definitely more than 1 2-hour workout that you'd be doing during the week. So it's basically 20 minutes a day is what you'll be doing.
Well, one of my favorite things about the way we structured this was also intentionally keeping it only 20 minutes, so it kind of modifies the intensity for someone trying to follow it, right? Because I think, again, back to my original challenge that I think people have is this idea like, oh, if I'm going to work out 6 days a week or increase the frequency on a muscle, I want to get after every workout, where 20 minutes only allows you about 5 to 8 sets tops.
At most
that you're going to be able to do in that amount of time, and then you have to move on. And if you pick, you know, half of those as compound lifts, that's going to take up a majority of your time, and then you got maybe time for like one isolation exercise.